I sort of go in sort of this other way of that, like, I'm all about community dialogue, and for me that's a lot of it with my stuff, and looking at that in my book, in GSA to Marriage, sort of a big thing in that book is looking at sort of, you know, like my life lived queerly, but also then like like thoughts about trans community and experiences that I had as have had like as a transgender queer femme, like from the experience of having transitioned F to M and living as a trans guy, and then the experience of being in like a trans guy community that was really, really set on those labels, and sort of the way that imploded.
Really femme-phobic.
And really femme-phobic. And that sort of like not seeing queer femmes at all, and sort of like the idea that I knew I wanted to play with gender, and that the only way that I really saw to do that was to become a trans guy. And then what happened when sort of like that unraveled for me and wasn't working, and what happened within my community when folks were like, you can't do this. What do you mean you're going to quit tea? You can't do that, because like in sort of what it did to their own identities, and in ways when it wasn't even about them, but it sort of like called into question their own perspectives, which was way too scary, and so it was much easier in some ways to sort of break away from that.
It's interesting to hear you saying that, because so much of, like, for me, XYT is kind of about looking at how tea isn't this like sacrosanct thing, right? Because I get a lot of drama relating to the show of people thinking that I shouldn't be on tea because I don't identify as male.
Me too.
Yeah.
What do you know?
I mean, it's funny because in all of the material, like all the promotional materials for the show, it'll say transgender butch, Kestrel Kale, you know, and that I consider myself a butch. I don't consider myself a man. I don't want to be a man. And it's, you know, I'm very open about being trans then, you know, which then is, I guess, it's like that thing of if people can see me and see me being like, well, I'm trans, then somehow that threatens someone else's invisibility, because clearly all trans people look alike, you know.
Well, I've definitely had that same exact thing happen, because I tell my own story in everything I do, pretty much. Like, when I'm writing an article, I'm writing about my own experience, and I very clearly say that. But because my experience is different than other trans men, they consider it not a trans experience. And
well, there's only one.
Yeah, there's one way, right?
It's the whole question then of like whether or not there is a quote-unquote trans community. You know, which I don't think we have the time or interest to get into right now.
Well, you know, the idea of trans in the media, or trans on stage, or trans in a visible place, I think that this is only a good thing. This is the new frontier of performance. This is like jumping on a train. Like, this is where it's going. This is where we have to get on now. But there's so many people who don't want us out there, right? I mean, do you feel like people wanted to shut you down because you're making it harder for people who want to be stealth, right? That's what I've been told. Like, I'm making other people's invisibility like impossible if other people know we're out there.
I've gotten that I'm, you know, spreading misinformation, because an experience that isn't one that they identify with is then misinformation about the trans condition. Even if I'm very clear, I think at least in my piece, that I'm speaking from my own story,
or from the ethnography,
or from these, like, and that it's very clear that these are like other people and their other voices, and that comes across.
But I think it's scary to people. Like, I think about like our show, which was Traders Without Treason, that is really about, and very much still in development, but was in the Hot Festival at Dixon, and it was very sort of about the politics of passing and what it means to be a queer couple who passes as straight, and what that looks like, and what it means to, you know, be, you know, to identify as a butch femme couple, and to, you know, be on a train and have, you know, like butch dykes like really visibly angry because like they'll see that I have like a black triangle tattoo, and they'll like think that like I used to be a dyke and then now I'm with a man, and what that means, and so like sort of like looking at like complications of that. I think it scares people. I think that, and we've had like trans folks not be happy, you know, or be concerned about us talking about being, you know, legally married and being queer and what that means, and so I think. But I think other people really like it too. Like, I think there's been a lot of people like, with both of our work and then our collaborative work that have been really excited that we're actually like putting those stories out there.
Yeah. And then it's funny to put that in context also of like people who end up seeing our work that are coming from places where like, if we think we don't have a lot of trans visibility here, I had, when XYT had its world premiere back in Portland, I had, Portland, Oregon, yeah, not Portland, Maine, a woman in the audience from Kyrgyzstan who was just like, I've never seen anything like this before. This is so amazing because it just doesn't exist. And she was trying to get me to come perform at some conference in Kyrgyzstan that I was like,
wow.
You know, I don't think the embassy would be on my side at that point. And they kill people like me, and you know,
I don't
like
think the U.S. Embassy really loves you.
The U.S. Embassy probably wouldn't really want me back anyways, and so, but you know, and so there's this whole thing of like, here we have the luxury of debating about like what the right representation is, as if there is one right representation to be putting out there, and ignoring the fact that there's anything is amazing. You know, so I'm gonna keep doing work. I'm not gonna let people thinking that it's not the story they want told shut that down, you know.